Also, everyone, thank you so much for all your feedback, comments. It's a big month and a bit ahead for the Kyokushin Shuffle. And very fortunate today to have a special guest, of course. Everyone, please, can I introduce Sensei Jason Baltov from Sydney. Sensei, good afternoon to you. How are you going?
Yeah, well, thanks.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think I'm up to the 15th, 16th episode here, and it's been fun. I'm trying to catch to 100. That's my mission, and I'm progressing as I go. And I appreciate your time here. Where do we find you as we speak?
So at the moment, I'm actually in Queensland. I normally live in the city of Sydney.
Yeah.
We live in an apartment block there, so with two kids, it's pretty hard to stay in isolation in an apartment block. So we thought before the border closed, we'd rush over to Queensland, and that's where my in-laws are. So
Yeah.
So it's a bit confusing. I live in Sydney. My dojo is actually in Wollongong, but at the moment I'm coming from Queensland.
Well, there you have it. We've got a bit to talk about then as to, the logistics of a lot of things. But let's get stuck into, we've got about 55 minutes or so in respect of, Jason, the young kid, or were you the young teenager, or what was it that got you, into martial arts, or in that angle, and away we go?
Yeah, so there is a bit of a story about it, and I probably want to go into the history of my dojo as well at the same time. But as a 10-year-old, my sister at the time, or my sister now, who does Kyokushin also, asked me to attend a class. It was in 1990, at the back end of 1990. I'm pretty bad with dates and stuff, so I can't remember specifics, but she asked me to come to a karate class, and back then I was heavily into rugby league, and up until the age of 18 I used to play rugby league, and I missed out on that class that she wanted me to go to. She was a little bit upset with me at the time, so I thought, make sure that the next class that she plans on taking me, I'll turn up. So the next time we took a drive into Wollongong, because I used to live where I grew up. It was a bit of a kind of a rough area of the Illawarra. Illawarra is like the regional area of Wollongong. And I guess I grew up in a probably, and I say it now, I'm still proud of the way that I grew up, but I grew up probably in a bad area of a rough town.
Sure.
And I guess at the time in a single parent family, living with my mother and two sisters. My sister's a little bit older than me, so I guess they understood that I kind of had to get some sort of grounding in martial art to make sure that I could look after myself in the area we kind of lived, and also to get a bit of adult male influence. So we went to karate, and the rest is history. I loved it for the first session from 10 years old, and I continue today. And as I said, I should go through the history of our dojo in the Illawarra. I obviously wasn't the founder, because, but I have taken over Illawarra Dojo. But it actually started in the 70s.
Okay.
My sensei was Steve Hardy, who just recently moved back to Wollongong from Melbourne, from Victoria.
Yes.
And he ran a dojo in the 70s at a place called the Downtown Gym. Now, the Downtown Gym was situated, I don't know if you recall the rugby league team, the Illawarra Steelers, but they had a stadium, and just below that stadium was a gym where they'd have weights, boxing, and it turns out also karate, Kyokushin Karate, because Steve started Kyokushin Karate in the Downtown Gym. Now, that was owned by a bit of a gangster type figure, but it was a really good dojo, and I guess he kind of decided to own a gym because he had close contact to those people that could fight and so forth.
Sure.
Which is kind of a bit of a twist to the story. I won't go too far into.
No.
But Steve started the dojo there. His original instructor or sensei was a gentleman you would have heard of named Frank Everett from the Gold Coast. I think he taught Shihan Cameron Quinn as well.
Yeah.
So we left the Gold Coast to come to Wollongong to teach in Wollongong.
Yep.
And then when I started, the dojo was in Crown Street, just above a cycle shop. And then since that time, it's moved all over the place. I've taken over, and it's now in a place called Unanderra, which is probably about 20 minutes south of Wollongong.
When did you, if we drop back and forth, all good, but when did you take over? When did you take over? When you were Showdown?
Okay, so, I had a pretty big involvement in the running of the dojo, even though I kind of wasn't the chief instructor there for some time. So by the age of, I would have been about 14 when Sensei Steve decided to move back to Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
He had a son that was a lot older than me. He would have been probably about 20 when I was 14. And he passed the dojo onto Paul at the time. And Paul kind of took over the running of the dojo. And slowly but surely, and I'm not sure if you know Shihan Steve, my original instructor, but back then when he ran the dojo, we had two other instructors. There was Graham Hunt, who had trained in Japan under Sensei, and there was another gentleman, my mind, Alan Matthews, who was also a really good instructor, and they all had their contribution to the dojo, which was really good. So we had three main instructors that kind of we could learn from.
Yeah, how good.
Sensei Steve at the time, or Shihan Steve now, he was. I've never really been into or another dojo where it has been as quite as strict. He when it came to discipline, it was almost. I mean, not that I've had the opportunity to live in Japan, but around that time, I think it was in the 90s. You couldn't probably run a dojo the same way that you did today, that we did back then. It was so strict. You couldn't move when you're going through Kihon. If you moved or scratched, you'd end up getting a shinai in the back.
Wow.
And the weird thing about it was back then under Steve was that although it was so strict, we always had about 50 in the class. There were no kids classes back then. So as a 14-year-old, from 10 years old, I trained with the adults. And I just remember it being so strict and the training so hard. They'd always go for about 2 hours, the sessions. And we had Steve on our backs all the time. Graham Hunt had the best technique. Obviously, he come back from Japan and had really good technique. So I got a lot of skill from him. And Alan Matthews was a little bit of a mixture of both. So,
hey, that's great. Well done, well said. Under the time strains, but I guess this is what I was sharing with you earlier. Now my brain goes into when I don't write questions down for everyone out there. I just go off and I enjoy it with the guests. Now, what and why did you start loving it? What was, you're seeing these grown men, you're seeing a mentor figure, one of the toughest instructors in Australia, still, and at that time, going about his success, with his dojo. What was it that triggered you? What were you going, I'm coming back?
As I said, I guess probably around that time, being a younger person, I needed a little bit more male adult influence.
Yes. Yeah.
And while I was there, not only was there that influence, but like at a magnitude that I guess made me want to, go back and train hard and better myself.
Right.
As I was playing football at the time, so I guess the fitness of karate and the discipline helped in that regard as well. I played a little bit of representative football even in my junior years. So it started off as something I guess I loved, probably more so for the fitness and discipline, and then throughout the years it pretty much became part of life.
Very good. So, what age were you approaching your Shodan grading, and how were you feeling about what was about to be in front of you, especially with the names that you've just mentioned?
Yeah, so I had, and just based off what you just mentioned before, I guess back then we had a lot of influence from outside the dojo too. So we used to get, we used to have Cameron come quite often to train with us, Cameron Quinn. Back then as well, Sensei Ishii, or Shihan Ishii, was there a lot with us, and they'd bring their students along with us. So we trained with Wally Schneibel, also, you know, you name it. Everyone that was kind of at the top of their game at the time used to come past our dojo on a regular basis. So I also had that influence. But I did my Shodan grading under Ishii when I was 15.
Wow.
I think it was quite rare, even in those days, for somebody so young to do the grading at that age. But I'd also started, and this is another story, just go off track a little bit. I started fighting in Colts, in the Colts division. Back then, I'm pretty sure it's the same, but back then the Colts division started at 16. So when I was 14, I put my name down for Colts as a 16-year-old. So everyone thought I was 16 pretty much. And then by the time I reached 16, well, then everyone just assumed I was 18. So I was actually fighting in the adult tournaments as a 16-year-old. So when I did my grading as a 15-year-old, it was I'd always been training with adults. I'd always sparred with the adults. So when I had to do my fights at the end of the grading, I fought with the adults, but it wasn't anything too different to what I'd already experienced, both in tournaments and in the dojo. So,
of course.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you have it. Okay, nice transition as such, but catch 22. You know, young gun, and but up against some heavy lads, and well, they've groomed you very well, hey, and they positioned you, you know, for your, I guess, teens, as such. So let's move into your angle of what you do professionally, because in respect of competing and so forth at that teens level, did you go straight into university after high school? How did you use, what you've just been through as such, to your positive?
Yeah. So I do think that karate pretty much did shape my life. With the way that I went in my occupation, but also even with the football, I had to make a decision eventually. I got to an age where it was becoming too tough to do both, and I always wanted to fight in the tournament. So every tournament that became available, I kind of went in. Yeah, I guess Kyokushin pretty much, once I decided I wanted to go that way, and I currently work for the police at the moment. From a relatively young age, I kind of wanted to join the police. And it's a bit weird, like if you speak to people and you saw where I grew up, I only really, and if I didn't have that Kyokushin influence, I could have went totally the opposite way. And even, with a lot of my school friends, they kind of went in an opposite direction to the way that I went. And I think I was pretty lucky that my sister took me to that dojo. Otherwise, I could have ended up in that same position. But yeah, so with the police, I started. I didn't join the police straight away after leaving school. I got a job with back then, and in Wollongong, as you know, it's a steel city. So there's a steelworks, BHP.
Yes,
it's no longer BHP. I think it's Blue Scope Steel or something.
Yes.
But BHP was around back then, and I just put in an application for a job. So I became a crane driver for about a year, I think, after school.
Wow.
It paid pretty good money. I was a security guard as an 18-year-old, believe it or not, but I used to work on the door of a nightclub in Wollongong, which was, now that I look back on it, it was a pretty hairy position to be in, being so young and having pretty much no knowledge at all of what I could get myself into doing that job. But it did give me a little bit of experience for the police when I eventually went into the police. And mind you, at this time, when I first started to work, and this is kind of around the time where I did have a big part in running the dojo, Illawarra Dojo. So Shihan Steve's son, Paul, and another gentleman at the time, Charles, were all black belts at the time. We moved the dojo from Wollongong to, as I said, to Unanderra. And we all, I think at that time I might have only been about 17 or 18, and I kind of I always wanted to move out of home and go and live, you know, with a bunch of mates and you know, and as a young person at that time, you know, have your own freedom. So we all got together and decided to open a dojo, but we lived in the dojo. So it was a big warehouse that we used to hire.
Oh, cool.
And we, I don't know how, but I think one of the guys was working for a demolition company at the time because we literally had no money.
Right. Here we go.
So with part of the demolition of one of his jobs, we took some of the wood and we built a big wall.
Nice.
And amazingly, the wall looked, you know, quite professional the way that we did it.
Yeah.
And on one side of the warehouse we lived, so we put furniture and we had bedrooms and that sort of thing. And on the other side we had a dojo where people would come, obviously, and we'd teach them. We'd train, and the money essentially from what we got from teaching people would pay for our accommodation.
Clever lads.
Yeah, so at that time I was living in a dojo, working security, and I was working for BHP as a crane driver, forklift driver, and whatever else.
Rock and roll. Hey?
I always, so it was pretty hectic. So, and now after that, about 2 years after doing all that sort of stuff, I joined the police force as a 20-year-old.
Yeah, right.
And I've remained in the police up until now, so I'm coming up to my 20th year.
Congratulations.
In the police. Yeah, thanks. And I was just thinking about it before we got on. It means it's almost 30 years in Kyokushin as well, which is time goes so quick.
Yeah, well, there you go. Hey, fantastic. Look at that. So that's certainly a very cool, you know, passion / you know, commitment and all those things that have slid into your life, and you're only 20. So, you know, you've nicely segued us towards, you know, the next part of where I go to, which was, you know, as a 20-year-old, you know, the angle that I can, I guess, vouch and share with you is marriage and kids. Okay. And fighting, you know, in world tournaments and being one of the top fighters in your category and division. How were you starting to, I guess, put all your commitment? You know, you would have done a lot of hard hours, a lot of training, a lot of, you know, focus and attention and wanting to go to Japan. And can you share us all those, I guess, things until you started to, you know, become that adult when you were married as such, you know? So your trip to Japan, your tournament success, and how you were so devoted and committed to that.
Yeah, so that'll take me through to the next 10 years because I didn't get married till I was about 30. But, but so from 20 years old, that was around the time I also got into kickboxing as well.
Oh, cool.
So where I was training at the time, and even with and I often talk about it with Steve, my instructor, being a kickboxer and doing Kyokushin, for me it was quite difficult because you were shunned a little bit as well. If you did Kyokushin, even around that time, it would have been 2000 when I started doing kickboxing. If you did Kyokushin, you didn't do any other martial art at that time.
Sure.
MMA wasn't real big, and so everyone kind of from my dojo, I'll just speak for myself here, had the philosophy that there's nothing better than Kyokushin and you don't do anything else. Around that time, I think also K1 started to become really big.
Sure.
And so I was interested in that, and I really wanted to be able to do kickboxing and karate at the same time. So I had a lot of pushback with regards to that. So I just started kickboxing, and but I was fully into training then. It was I just started in the police, so where I was quite lucky to be stationed in Wollongong.
Oh, good.
And where I was there, it wasn't so close to the dojo, but there was a kickboxing gym quite close to where I used to work. So what I would normally do is my week would consist of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we had Kyokushin training. And I think on a Saturday morning, we used to train back then as well. Then Tuesday, Thursday, and I think after Kyokushin on a Saturday, I'd go and do sparring for kickboxing. And then I normally left Sunday as a day off. So as I got into it and started fighting a lot more, quite often if I had the day off, and in the police back then I was in general duty, so we'd do a 12-hour shift. And when you do 12-hour shifts, you'd only have to do 4 shifts in a row, and then you'd get 5 off or something like that. So
Yes.
that was a bit of a benefit for me, because I wanted to be a fighter and I wanted to go well. I normally train in the morning and in the evening. So with the kickboxing, and by the way, I met my trainer in kickboxing, Laureano, his name was Laureano Laurie. I met him. He was a professional boxer, and I knew I kind of already had the kicks down pat. I just had to learn how to box. So he taught me pretty much the fundamentals of boxing, and so I'd train with him, and he had a job where he did shift work as well. So quite often our shifts aligned, and we'd train in the morning. We'd do about an hour in the morning, and then I'd meet him again, normally on a Tuesday, Thursday in the evening. So there was quite a fair bit of training. I was watching some of the other interviews that you've done with other people, and what you'll find is that with a lot of fighters, and this is, you know, a mistake some people make. They think that when they start fighting, they're going to be winners straight away from the beginning. But what you'll find with a lot of fighters is that they lose a lot before they actually start winning. So particularly in Kyokushin, and as a youngster, I'd lose a lot, and it'd upset me. But eventually you get to a point where you win more than you lose.
Sure.
And the same as with kickboxing, although I didn't really lose in kickboxing until maybe later on, after about 5 or 6, maybe I think 6 fights where I was undefeated before I started to fight people of a really good caliber.
Right.
So I say to my own students, you know, there's a point where you're going to lose, and you've got to be able to learn from your mistakes. So so I just continued to fight right through from 20 years old. I think it was probably just over 30 before I kind of stopped fighting. And I never ever made a decision not to fight anymore. I guess life started to take shape for me, like with marriage and the prospect of having kids. When I was 25, I think it was, I moved into a different area within the police where I am now. I work for the Protection Operations Unit within the New South Wales Police, and what our role is, we focus on the protection of dignitaries. We work in close alignment with the Federal Police. So I started as a 25-year-old in that unit, so I had to move to Sydney. And once again, that put another fork in the road.
Spanner in the works.
Spanner in the works for training, because I had ideas on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve, but Wollongong was an hour and a half away. So what I end up doing is I end up just quite often travelling back and forward. I trained whenever I had the opportunity, because within my unit where I work as well, we have the opportunity to train throughout the day. So whatever opportunity I got throughout the day, I'd train and prepare for tournaments and so on and so forth.
I mean,
it seems as though I've missed out on a whole heap there, but
no, it's coming out, and
10 years in a nutshell.
And it comes out that way, and I appreciate it, because you know you're so busy. I can visualize how busy you are. You know, up in the morning, do your job, come back and train, eat well, sacrifice a lot of your left and rights, I call, which is going out and partying as such, and then doing extra curriculum activities, e.g., what do you think you're doing kickboxing for? Who do you think you are? Kyokushin's the only the holy grail, and it's like, whoa, stand by. And that's in, like you said, in mid 2000s, when it was only dabbled as such, in respect of well, it's going to take you years to get better, and it's going to take you years to sacrifice. And it's still today. A lot of people still have that chip on their shoulder. I mean, one of mine is just in this conversation, and for students out there that have to appreciate what our masters as such, and yours, is a similar age to mine, was that's what they had, that's what they did, and that's what they lived for, and they lived for the Buddha way, and they didn't piss fart around as such, and they would commit absolutely everything to making sure. You know, my chip is, yeah, I'd love to do more, you know, grappling, more jiu-jitsu. You know, and then you go, well, there's a dojo to run. There's more students to bring up. There's the next generation of fighters. And that's what leads me to this, is how you've committed your, you know, life towards fighting. How are you supporting, and I guess what's your message to some of those out there that are listening in respect of, you know, hey, once you get a chance, or once you're committed to it, because the martial art, the Kyokushin scene at the minute is, and you and I just brought it up before, and for those, my Shihan would tap me on the shoulder and say, we're going to Wollongong, we're going to New South Wales in 2 weeks. You're fighting in the ACCA tournament. I'm like, I'm sorry, what's that? And obviously I wouldn't say that. I'd say us, and we would go off and fight. And I tell my students, you've got to be 90% ready, because we're fortunate now that there's so many tournaments, but we're not so fortunate that there isn't the one big one. But that's another conversation. But there's so many, there are many out there. So how are you gesturing to others at the minute, and your students as such, in that era that you've just had, as to what they should and shouldn't do?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different, I guess, from the time, and even though it was probably, you know, only 10 years ago, when I was, you know, really fighting consistently, things have changed a little bit. I think it's a little bit difficult just to, and it may still happen in certain dojos, but there's only a very small percentage of people that are actually willing to fight, I believe, and
Sure.
And for those, and the way I see it as well is that when people walk into your dojo, not everyone within the dojo wants to be, you know, the Australian
Sure.
Kyokushin champion.
Yeah.
So you kind of treat people with how they kind of, with their direction and the way that they want to go. But with my students, you know, when I see that they want to compete, we get, well, us as a dojo, we get behind them 100%. And one thing I forgot to mention, by the way, is that with my dojo, the way it runs now, and what I've kind of put in place, because I can't always be there, is that all the black belts that have come through in my dojo, and I'm always promoting them to run their own show and make their own or start their own dojo. I'd be 100% behind that, but a lot of them actually have stayed back and want to continue to train out of the dojo that started.
Yes.
So I've the benefit of about 6 black belts. There's one other Sandan that kind of runs the show with me, Sensei Shane Cunliffe. And then there are a number of other black belts under us that we kind of form a bit of a committee. And whenever there's a tournament on that somebody wants to compete in, all the black belts and all the students get behind those fighters, or whoever it is that wants to fight. And we prepare them to a degree where we know that they're going to do well. I think if you push people to go into a tournament and they're not 100% keen, you're probably not going to get the best out of them. But the one thing that we've always, the philosophy we've always used within the dojo is that no matter what level of fighting that you do, you always approach it as a professional.
Sure. That's good.
If, for instance, you're fighting in a local tournament, and that's fine, but it's Kyokushin and kickboxing and any combat sport. It's not like a team sport where you can rely on your mate next to you. You pass the ball, or you know, in football, or you've got to make a tackle, you can rely on your mate to do it. Once you're in the ring or on the mat, you're by yourself. So we try and approach things as professional as we can. We normally get people to, we have compulsory training for those that are going to fight. And I haven't for a while, but I also actually used to get my fighters to go on a strict diet as well. I had a nutritional friend a nutritionist as a friend that used to make up diets for us as well. So we haven't actually been that strict as of late, but we haven't also probably gone in as many tournaments as what we would like. But yeah.
That's cool.
I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, no,
I've got
it
a
does.
tendency to go off track, but there's so much to talk about.
And I say I appreciate, because it shares some insight that you know, a lot of people might catch and what's the word I'm looking for? They might be able to go, oh, we're similar, or we're not, or that's interesting,
Yeah.
and that was cool. Hey, so let's slide into a bit more. You head to Japan at any time in this period?
Yes. So whilst I was competing in kickboxing, I think it was been about the age of, oh, that's right. Yeah. So I was 20 when I first went to Japan. I fought in the, and at that stage, see, we were all obviously part of one group once upon a time.
Sure.
Back when I started in 1990, Kyokushin was all one group. Then I think it was 93 when Sensei passed away and everything started to split apart. So initially we came under Sensei Ishii and the Nishida group, which I think now is formed into Shin Kyokushin.
Mm-hmm.
And my instructor at the time decided that he wanted to take us in a different direction. And I'll go back a little bit again because it was my first opportunity to compete overseas that I was so keen on. But because of, and it's totally my fault, but because I'd lied about my age for so long, when it came around to the time for me to be selected, I was too young to compete. So my first tournament probably overseas would have been in 97. Now in 97, we had a national tournament. Shihan Ishii organised it. It was at Willoughby Town Hall. I competed because I was a black belt by then, I competed in the open lightweight division. That was a point in time in my life where I could stay under 70 kilos. Now I'm lucky if I can stay under 80. But so I was pretty young, 17. I fought in my first open national tournament, and I beat all the Australians, and I fought my first Japanese fighter in 97. We went, I think, 2 extension rounds. Oof. And I obliterated his legs. I was smashing them as hard as I could.
Nice.
And it was that typical Japanese mentality. He just would not go down. Mm-hmm. I eventually won the fight, and I didn't actually see, but from what everyone else told me, that the Japanese fighter had to get carried off because his legs were that badly damaged.
Well played.
And then I lost to the All Japan champion.
Oh, jeez.
I can't think of the exact name. It was so long ago, but I should probably know. I lost to him, and then so after that tournament, because I was the only Australian I think I came equal third with one of the other Japanese. That was like a selection tournament, and I thought, yes, I get to go overseas and fight for the first time as a 17-year-old. And back then, I had a lot of people that I used to idolise, like as you know, everyone obviously idolised Gary O'Neill at the time. But one person he had a lot of competition with, who actually beat him on one occasion, was a fighter named Frank Russo. I'm not sure if you ever heard of him.
Yeah.
So Frank was kind of, I was only a kid back then, but whenever we had a camp or we trained together with Shihan Ishii at the time, I'd always be following Frank around. Also Daniel Trifu, who was a good fighter in that division, in the middleweight division, I think back then, with Gary. And Tom Lavar, they were all my idols back then. And I remember Frank saying, okay, if you win this tournament, I'm going to show you around. I can't remember whether or not it was to get to Japan or not. And I was so keen. And then Ishii back then, when he found out I was 17, he said, oh, you can't compete. And I was like, damn. But it was my fault that whole time because I lied about my age. And I think it'd obviously have something to do with insurance. So I missed out on my first tournament overseas then. And then shortly after, I think it might have been 1998, when I was 18, we swapped over to the AKA, so under Hanshi John Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
So all the organizations formed, and it split. So all of a sudden, we were coming under Matsushima rather than Nishida, who was who eventually became Kenji Midori and Shin Kyokushin. So my first tournament that I got selected for Japan would have been in 2000. And the first fight I had in that, it was an open tournament, was against a Russian. And back then we also had ring karate. So we had so many things going on back then. And I was literally fighting probably maybe once a month or maybe, once every couple of months,
Sure.
which was really good for the experience side. So I went over to Japan with another guy named, what was his name? Dignitary. He was also a Russian Australian. Might have been Dignitary. Can't recall. Bad memory. Sorry.
It's all right.
So I went over with the team. There was, I think, George Cooney at the time, who was a really good lightweight fighter. We were always kind of in close battle. There was an Australian / Russian who was a really good fighter, and Jim Sklavos. I'm not sure if you know him, but he's pretty prominent instructor in Sydney.
Yep.
So we all went over, and the first fight I got was a Russian.
Yep.
And before I went onto the mat, Serge Dmitriev, his name was. Serge goes to me, and I was only still like 20-year-old, like still pretty young. He goes, "Watch your liver." He said that to me like he sounded a little bit like Schwarzenegger at the time. Watch your liver, and I go, "Oh, that's a good thing to say to me just before I go on a mat against this guy that's probably another 15 kilos heavier than me, this Russian guy."
Yeah.
Anyway, we went for my first Japanese tournament. We went 3 rounds, 3 extensions, and in the last 10 seconds, I don't know where it came from. I thought I was actually winning too in the last round, but the last 10 seconds, this Sotoma Washigiri came over and clipped me. And it didn't actually knock me out, but it put me down for about maybe a second, and it gave him a half point, and then that put him in front. So went all the way to Japan and lost in the first fight.
Oh man!
Any consolation of that Russian guy ended up coming, I think, in the top 5. So
nice. Wow. Yeah, and how tough is it? How tough is it to just swallow that and get on a plane and have a good sayonara party and then get out of there?
It happened a second time with me like that as well, and I think the third time. So I went another time. The second time would have probably been 2004, I think, because it's every 4 years. I did in the Matsushima group, and everyone talks about the different groups and how big they are, and which group's better than the other. And although Matsushima group probably wasn't the biggest at the time. We still had it was probably 130 or 140 people in the open division of the world tournaments. The Russians were always really strong, as they are in every organisation. And I think in the second time I went, I can't recall exactly. It might have been 2004 or 2008, because I know I didn't miss one. I did get into the top 32 in Japan.
Yeah.
But then after that, the last time I went to Japan, and I think I was about 30 at the time. It might have been 2008. I can't remember. Another disappointment. And it was coming off the back of when we had the World Cup. So the World Tournament and the World Cup, as you know, World Cups in each organisation is a weighted division tournament, whereas the World Tournament's open. So in the weighted division tournament in Sydney, I came second. But so off the back of that, I thought I'm really going to do well in this will be my last hurrah. I'm getting a bit older now. I want to move into my career and start getting better at that.
Yes.
So once again, I come up against the Ukrainian. And this is one thing that really disappointed me at the time. I'm well over it now. But for the Ukrainian, once again, bad memory. Can't remember his name exactly. But I fought his training partner in Sydney in 2006.
Okay.
And I put him down with a hizagiri within about 40 seconds, I think. And this young bloke who I fought for the last time in Japan in the first round, I don't think he was as good a class of fighter as the guy that I had beaten earlier. Anyway, I chased him around the ring for 3 minutes, kicked him around the place. But around that time, obviously, I was heavily into kickboxing, and people around the place knew about that. So there were 2 punches that came pretty close to his face. One, I believe, actually hit his shoulder blade, but he kind of jumped to the floor as soon as that happened.
Yeah.
And anyway, I didn't get any warnings at the start, so I had a half point taken off me, and then the second time it was again 10, and then he just ran away for the whole fight, and I was so disappointed in that first fight because I knew that
that would be it.
I probably would have done well in that tournament. So my experience in Japan hasn't been the best in that regard, but I value all the experience.
But you're here to talk. You're here to talk about. You're here to share it with others. And one of my biggest passions from here is passions being, the work that's going to have to be committed is, a dream. And for everyone listening here is to start taking our fighters, the lads. The lads meaning that we went through the journey of it, but this time prepared. Our Shihan's prepared us. Don't get me wrong there, but now it's their understanding of how quick and easy and simple it can be, just fucking taken from you, and that preparation is not the question. Everyone will commit and do that. It's now the experience of the likes of yourself and so forth that go, okay, listen here, listen tactically to this stuff, and I tactically have rules and placements to our guys because of the errors as such that I made as well. And one of my, if you might vouch as well, was how I fought, and then how strong I thought I was strong. You're going, I'm strong, I'm ready to go. You could hit me with a truck, I'm good to go. And then I fought Taneo Sensei from Spain, and I went, what the hell was that? What is that? It was just so strong, just such a bull. And I was like, oh man, that's double the work. And luckily I know Spanish, so I could talk to him about it afterwards. And the level that he trained compared to what I thought I was training at a great intensity at, no, it wasn't there. And then we had Shihan Takuma at Shihan Billy's camp last year, and he's now 78, but he fought at 93. And he was just identifying with this, the tactical side of how his cardio was to the level of exhaustion. So his mitt work on the big bag was not just, all right, let's do 3 minutes, hands, go, and you go hard. And then time, he's like, no, keep going. We're like, what do you mean, 6 minutes? No, keep until, and then he showed it as until fall down. And we're like, fall down? He's like, yeah, kaput. It could go for 15. And we're like, oh, okay. And hearing it from the world champ in our organization, it was shit. Again, simple thing that we heard and experienced, and like you've just done, like you've just shared with many others, and I'm sure your students are listening and they've heard it a lot, but people like myself and my students would now appreciate your efforts and your representation of Australia. So well done, but bittersweet.
One thing with fighting as well. Yeah. One of the hard things to get around as well is the mental side of it. So as well as training your body to be as best as fit and as strong as you can be, like you just mentioned, and like we always try to train in a similar sort of fashion where, okay, maybe you're not falling down, but you can't have a lot left in the tank when you're training, mainly because you've got to be thinking about your opponents, and you've got to be able to you got to know inside your mind that you've trained harder than your opponent. That you've got to know that you've done more. And one thing that I always used to think about is I think it was a quote from one of Sensei's books, was that you've got to train more than you sleep.
Right.
And that might be, difficult, but it's kind of the mentality that you got to have, and that's the way that I always approach things. I like not just within karate, but even within everything that we do as karate people. Kyokushin instills a specific hardness inside you, and it gives you that drive, that spirit of us to always try your best and not give up. But for me, the difficult thing was more so the fight against myself. And that's why I say only a small percentage of people will actually put their hand up to fight, because mentally it is hard. But what I found before, both in kickboxing and Kyokushin fights, I'd prepare myself to a point where I could go 3 or 4 rounds in a Kyokushin fight and not have a problem with it. In actual fact, the more rounds it went, the better I felt, because I knew that I was always going to be fitter than the other person. But the hardest thing was probably more so the fight against myself, and the couple of nights before the actual tournament, because there's always a lot of pressure on how you're going to perform, or a couple of nights before the kickboxing fight that you have. You're thinking about your opponent. You're thinking about, the plan that you've been going over week by week in training, and you start to kind of almost, if you're not careful, you start to talk yourself out of the actual fight before you get onto the mat. So the more experience you get, and the more you fight, the easier it becomes. Not to a point where you don't have any nerves, because as I always say to my fighters, the best fighter in the world was always a little bit nervous before going onto the mat. But it's how you can control those nerves. And and I got it to a point where I felt that I could control my nerves quite well. And so that's a part of training that I kind of try and focus on with my students and my fighters as well.
That's very cool. That's cool when you sharing that, because one tip I got, and I'll share it with everyone, was via Shihan Steve, and we were warming up in Okinawa in '08 in part of the Australian team, and something came about, and then he just said, in respect of how you're feeling, how you're going, and we spoke, and then he just blurted out a thing that stuck with me forever, and it was in respect of, if you condition everything else from here below, so you should condition it to never have an issue and not be fearful of anyone hurting you in that manner, and then the rest from here and above, keeping your hands up is obviously key number one, but then number two on that is that the confidence of everything else being so fully prepared, so ready, that you don't need to be worried about the whole rest of your body. The rest of it is going to be, covering your head and maintaining that. Just that simple tip there, and your guidance there, and just sharing with mentally, being ready. Because our Shians and your Shihan Steve and so on, they would have seen and been a part of that 70s and 80s era of just absolute, bash and crash and total, bruteness of Kyokushin, and I was instilled that as I was taught, go, 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 keep going, keep going, keep going. And it was like, holy shit, this is full on. And now I call it a bit of a cycle as such, where now we don't prepare, we don't know who's in the draw, we're not quite sure who'll be there. If you take care of yourself, if you maintain, those nerves and that control, and you prepare yourself, you've got a real good chance. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the one thing Shihan Steve was good, particularly with fighting for me, he always instilled confidence in everybody. Always did that. He was like a hell of a motivator, and I think that's why always his dojos are quite. He's a good promoter, a good motivator. His dojos are always quite successful, and he taught me to run a successful dojo as well. But the one thing he also kind of taught me was to keep all the negativity away.
Okay.
Keep it out of your mind. And what can sometimes happen as well, you have obviously a lot of people that are living around you that don't have any knowledge of Kyokushin, or don't have any knowledge of having to compete in any way. And what can sometimes happen, and depending on who you hang out with, or it could even be your parents. And I always used to think and say to people, like, respect your parents 100% all the time. But when they start talking about what you're going to do in a tournament, you probably don't want to listen too much.
I hear you.
They're always going to have a lot of concern for you, and then they might put things into your mind that you don't want to be in there. So, so I guess just on top of what you've already mentioned, I mean, you pretty much covered it all, but you've got to keep that negativity out and not think any bad thoughts. And the way that I always used to think going into a fight is that if the person's going to beat me, they're going to have to knock me out, because I'm not going to stop.
That's it.
And that was my mentality all the time. So
that's great. No, that's really cool. Well done. Well done on your, I guess, fighting career and so forth. And again, in sharing this and getting it out there, we don't have Blitz anymore. We don't have those platforms for people of all this. So in highlighting this, well done. I thank you for that. But from here, we've got about 5 to 10 more minutes, Sensei. So let's double into the future of things, and I'm 39. You're turning 40 soon. Yeah, we're about the same age. So, you know, we've got some big responsibilities ahead of us, and this is the part that I like the most, because it's the nice and pressure, I guess I call it, the fun pressure of what's ahead and where we take it from here. So how are you, I guess, foreseeing, and what message have you got to share with how you're taking it from here? And, you know, the groups you're independent now as such, but what are you seeing and how are you working towards the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, so we were planning on having like a really big year within the dojo and within my dojo in the Illawarra this year, until all this has happened with COVID-19. It's obviously affecting everyone, but so the way things have gone for us is that so as an instructor, I had a number of decisions to make, just in as you said, the direction of the dojo. So the group that we were with until recently was Aikyo Matsui, and at the end of last year, for pretty much not so much for my own sake, but for a direction that I kind of want to take my students, we decided, and we did it like in a way where there was no animosity. You know, I've got really good friends within that organisation, and I was really thankful for Shihan Steve, who was the branch chief at the time. But we decided to go in a different direction. So this year was going to be a big year where we make a decision on whether or not we stay independent or we go with another organisation. My thought process at this point in time is that we're going to kind of, you know, choose another organisation that we run with. But the way that I run my dojo at the moment, and as I said, I'm the chief instructor there along with Sensei Shane, but we've got a number of other black belts. The way that I run it as a little bit more of a democracy, where I hold meetings with all my black belts, and when a decision has to be made, I make sure that there's a consensus before things happen.
Yeah, right.
So we kind of we thought about who we might go with. That decision wasn't made. No firm decision was made there because of everything that happened, and we all had to kind of segregate from each other. So we plan on having a whole heap of meetings like this where we can, you know, talk about things in the interim. But I kind of want to be somewhere where I've got within my dojo, I've got a fair amount of freedom. I think being with the Matsui group, we were very restricted on, you know, where we could compete and that sort of thing. And that was, you know, one of the hard things. Awesome organisation, awesome overseas, going to tournaments and stuff like that. But being in a country that's kind of segregated from, except for New Zealand, but from the majority of the world, we need to be able to spread our wings a little bit within our own country. So my plan is to be somewhere where I've got a lot of freedom, where my students can attend camps like Judd Reed's camp that he had coming up, without any concern of, you know, getting into trouble for it. But once we find out exactly where we want to go, I've been in meetings, and by the way, I think what Judd's doing is really good, and I really think, you know, this concept, you're bringing everybody together, you're keeping everyone informed, which was really good on your part. Melbourne and Victoria seem to be ahead of New South Wales at the moment.
Always have, mate. What do you mean at the moment?
But so you seem to be doing really good things down in Mexico there. So I'll probably I've met with and as I said earlier, Daniel has been a close friend of mine, Daniel Trifu. So I've met with him a few times, and we've discussed perhaps maybe doing a similar sort of concept. You know, get guest instructors and have camps and stuff like with Judd is having at the moment. So I kind of want to get into that aspect. Maybe get into tournament promoting again. There's some really good tournaments.
That's exciting.
So we head that way, and just pretty much. So with the way that my dojo is, I live in Sydney, so it takes me about an hour and a half to get to my dojo. So I'm only there probably twice, if I'm lucky, 3 times a week. And I only manage to do that because I kind of have a bit of a schedule with with work, I'm one of the managers there now, so I can kind of roster myself and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But my ultimate plan was to build my dojo this year, which has kind of been set back a little bit. The student numbers were coming up.
Yeah.
And we're planning. So we've got a big warehouse that's specifically for karate.
Yeah.
And there's a warehouse next door, so we're planning on moving next door and making it a massive facility.
Yeah.
We do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We do karate Saturday mornings, and then kickboxing Tuesday, Thursday. So we utilize it for other things as well. So pretty much the plan was to build upon the dojo, going in as many tournaments as we could.
Cool.
See you guys out in Anglesea at the camp, that sort of thing.
Well,
just being involved.
No, that's good on you. And I guess great to hear. Thanks for sharing. I guess the part that's difficult for a lot of us is we're a bit stagnant in respect of that. Like camps and tournaments and that. But what I guess we can all do is like you just said, continue to keep the lines of communication open and keep everyone informed and on their toes. And that's what I love about this. It's keeping motivation and some inspiration, I guess, and getting everyone to be aware of someone like yourself and someone that they're not familiar with. And I'll continue to do that. And I appreciate you sharing your hour here. But from here on, what do you see and what do you feel in respect of how you're going to COVID is going to do what it does, and the growth of Kyokushin / again, I tried to keep it as a martial art language because there are other styles out there that like listening to what's going on, but your passion and your drive, you're a Budu Way kid. There's no doubt about that. You started as 10 years old. So, what's your message before we finish off and sign off to those out there, who are training from home, who are doing their online? One of my pushes on my online is you got to be ahead. How are you finding your way to being ahead? What's your message to some of the people out there before we sign off?
Yeah, so I guess so we're doing pretty much a similar sort of thing to you, where we're running our classes via Zoom at the moment.
Yeah.
So I guess the basic thing at this time is just to stay in tune with your health and fitness. It's gonna help you mentally get through this period of time anyway. So continue to log on and support your instructors and support your fellow students, the people that you train with. I guess keep living the Kyokushin way. I guess you've got to maintain that spirit of us. And just like Sensei did in solitude, you can train by yourself and continue with what you've learned over the years. And stay in touch with the people that you train with and care about, just to keep in touch and keep your mind and everything focused.
That's it.
Yeah, just pretty much that's it.
That's good.
Yeah, no. I think that's about it. That's what we're doing, and
and that's good.
And you've got to kind of, one thing I should say as well is like I'm kind of like the glass half full kind of bloke. I try and find a positive in everything, and for me this has been a fairly stressful time, not just for the fact that I can't run the dojo from the actual dojo itself, or work's a little bit different now, but I also run a business as well where we have 20 people that rely heavily upon us being open in my business. You've just got to, I guess, take something positive. And the positive thing that I've taken out of all this is that I've got 2 small children and my wife, and it's given me the opportunity to spend more time with them, which I otherwise would not have had that opportunity.
Of course.
So normally quite busy, but now you get to spend a lot of time with your family.
Yes.
So take whatever it is, take some sort of positive out of it.
Yes.
And that'll keep you on track, and it'll keep you sane. And then obviously, periods of time when you have an opportunity to train, then
great call.
Do that.
Great call,
Yeah.
great finish there, Sensei, because that is one thing that I'm similar. 3 kids and daddy daycare, I call it, and missing training and missing the camaraderie and missing the mateships and missing all the above. But we'll be back into it, but I can't wait for everyone to, and all respect to everyone in Illawarra, and been there a couple of times and had some good dabbles with some of the lads there, and keep up the hard training from you guys. You guys, respect to you, respect to your Shihan as well, and hopefully I'll catch him on an interview as well. But many people to have a chat with. But Sensei, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and stay safe, especially with your role, especially with what's just happened in Melbourne as well, with the law enforcement officers. And for those out there that are listening, our prayers and thoughts to everyone in regards to that, and to everyone in the law enforcement division. There's a whole lot of you out there in Kyokushin and in martial arts that are serving and protecting. A message from myself, and then also with Sensei here, who's living and breathing it every day for the last 20 years. So Sensei, thank you so much.
Yes.
We look forward to probably having a chat when things come back up, and hearing how you are going with the independent side of what tournaments you might be doing, and what we can do all together and unite.
Yeah, we had the opportunity, I think, late last year to go in a tournament with Richie Saunders. Sorry, I've known him for such a long time. I can't believe that his name skipped my mind. But yeah, I had the opportunity to compete in his tournament. My students had an opportunity last year. So what I plan is that we're going to probably visit Victoria on a more regular basis.
Fantastic.
Things to be going really well there. So we'll try and make it there on a more regular basis, and hopefully we can meet in person.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.